All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here, we're doing our 2025 college football Big 12 conference predictions. We've went ahead and broke down every single team in this conference in depth, in full, already on the channel. So we're going to start with some awards, look at our all-conference team, and then, of course, slightly touch on our standings as well. If you want those full breakdowns, though, those are available. Getting started with those awards, Josh Hoover, I think we're both completely sold. This guy's going to be a superstar this year for TCU. Now in his third year, of having meaningful action on field. He should really ascend this year, and his production is going to certainly mirror that. Isaiah Glasker, for me, is Defensive Player of the Year. I love the way this guy plays the ball game. A bit of an old school linebacker, very productive, hits very hard. I think he's going to be a great leader for a nice BYU defense. Coach of the Year, Dave Aranda. Expect Baylor to be in the mix this year. Compete for 8 to 10 wins. So I'm going to give him Coach of the Year nod. Daniel Highshaw for Kansas. That's going to be an offense that wants to remain very well in touch when it comes to running the football at a high rate, and I think he's going to be their lead back, so I'll go ahead and give him the nod there. Marcus Deal, him and his brother are going to be great for that TCU defense. He's about 325 pounds. Defensive tackle was impressive as a freshman. Expect him to take the next step this year. Five-star tight end Lincoln Kier. Bit of a cop-out answer at freshman for newcomer of the year, but I think, as a five-star, they're going to get him involved right away. And, of course, TCU is a big sleeper team for the both of us. Nick, of course, we like to be a little different as we can with these awards. I know for the most part we typically agree, but for the sake of this, we do like to have most of them be completely opposite. So that's why yours don't exactly mirror mine at all. But these are still some good picks that you have here regardless. And I think these are ones that could certainly come to fruition, including your breakout player of the year. And, of course, Dante Corleone, him reminding everyone how good of a defensive tackle he is for Cincinnati.
It would have been tough for me to find a different offensive player than Josh Hoover. I think Hoover was just phenomenal for his team this year, TCU. He was really good last year. I think he'll certainly be over a 4,000-yard passer, really accurate and really solid. I think he'll be able to lead that team to higher success. You'll see later in the episode that I'm quite high on them. As for some of my picks here, I think there's some very interesting players here overall. Rashawn Sanford at Houston, I think he'll be a big breakout back. He was okay for them last year in his touches, had about 450 yards and a touchdown. I think he'll have a lot more this year. He's a really solid, speedy back who I think can really do a lot at 5'9", 185. He should be a key part of an offense that is probably going to take a little bit of a step forward this year. The other three picks I have are all defense. We'll start with Dante Corleone, who I think is a really strong player to be a massive player in this conference as Defensive Player of the Year for me. I think Corleone's phenomenal. I think he's a really good player from the Cincinnati area. He had 26 total tackles last year, 4 QB hurries, 3.5 sacks. He could double or triple those numbers this year. He'll be really productive for the Cincinnati team that needs the help on the defensive line. He's a big body there that's also very agile. Speaking of teams that need help on the defensive line, I think Zamir Hawk's a really good pick at Iowa State. 6'3", 305. He's huge. Had a couple of tackles last year. Didn't really do a whole lot in his limited reps, but I think he'll get a big increased load as a redshirt sophomore. I think he'll be a big breakout player on the defensive side of the ball for the Iowa State team that I'm quite high on. I have them as my sleeper team. I think they'll be really good after having some success last year, but falling just short in the conference title game. And then West Virginia has a player for my last pick here. I think Jamarian Robinson was a phenomenal add out of the portal. This is a guy that was really good at UTSA last year. 17 tackles for loss, 10.5 sacks, 8 QB hurries. He's a guy that's just a physical wreck, 6'4", 295. He's an absolute freak of nature. I think he'll have a phenomenal year and be the best player on a bad West Virginia team. Keeping my eye on him all season. Excited to see what he can do in the Big 12.
Now I move to our all-conference offense. Of course, Josh Hoover once again. He's going to have a great year. He's going to be the first team all-quarterback. Bryson Washington, Dylan Edwards. Washington was a great player as a freshman last year for Baylor. Very impressive running back. Dylan Edwards, I envision a Deuce Vaughn-type role at Kansas State this year. Due to his size, though, he's not going to have a crazy amount of touches, but he's certainly going to do very well in terms of effectiveness and efficiency, much like Vaughn did many years back. Jordan Tyson, one of the top receivers in the country. Caleb Douglas from Texas Tech. This is not a guy many people probably know of, but I think he's a great player for the Red Raiders, and he's going to really impress this season. 1,200-yard campaign on the way. Tanner Kazol at tight end for Houston comes over from Ball State, one of the top tight ends in the country. I think he's going to continue to play at a high level at the Big 12. Offensive line, Spencer Fano, Jordan Seaton, I think pretty obvious additions there up front at the tackle positions. Great interior offensive line for Texas Tech. Davion Carter makes this first team. And then you have Bryce Foster from Kansas, who I think has had a nice resurgence to his career after things kind of got off the rails at Texas A&M. He's going to continue to play at a high level. What do you think of this first team offense, Nick? The difference between the Big 12 and these other conferences is there's not as many obvious selections, so you can typically have some fun here and, dip and dab with a handful of different selections. So I think we have a nice, group here, but ones that all make sense at the end of the day.
I think this makes a lot of sense. For me, there's four players on this list that absolutely have to be there no matter what you're talking about. It starts with Josh Hoover, who we've sung his praise already. Jordan Tyson's my other absolute have to have on any sort of all conference offensive list because he's just such a phenomenal asset, and he'll be the top receiver for an Arizona State team that should be high flying again with a great quarterback in Sam Levitt under center who misses out on this list, but not by much. He's a very strong quarterback. I think Tyson's just a phenomenal player. And the other two guys I think you absolutely have to have are Spencer Fano and Jordan Seaton. There should be All Americans come the end of the season. Both of them, they're really strong offensive tackle pieces that were really good at their two programs last year and should take a step forward. I'm certainly highlighting Seaton, who really impressed me last year on a bad offensive line. He stood out as the best player on a terrible offensive line. He should do that again. The product out of Washington, D.C. area is just a phenomenal athlete who's continuing to develop a rare high school recruiting star that Colorado has landed in this age where they get a lot of portal pieces. Seaton's going to be a phenomenal player for them. He should have an incredible season. Fano as well will be really good. I like Kuzi at tight end. I think he's a really interesting player they added out of the portal. Bryson Washington at running back for Baylor is another very intriguing player on this list. He's a guy that could certainly have a really strong season and make himself a household name. Overall, I really do like this list, and I think there's a lot of really talented players here on a bunch of different teams.
Now I move to the all-conference defense for the Big 12. You know about David Bailey, superstar transfer from Stanford. He'll be a great pass rusher. The aforementioned Dante Corleone, Dom Orange, Najalet Kelly, two guys that aren't getting as much love, I think, from the national media. I know the Big 12 media knows about Dom from Iowa State. He's a phenomenal leader there for what's a pretty weak defensive line, so his play is very valued. Kelly, on the other hand, this is a highly talented player, probably the top pass rusher in the conference. UCF's probably not going to be all that good this year. Doesn't matter. He's probably going to have double figures when it comes to sacks. He's going to be very productive, so he's going to get first team honors. Love the linebacking group. Jacob Rodriguez, Austin Romaine, your two highly productive players for teams that are going to be really good this season. Tech, of course, is trying to improve significantly on the defensive side of the ball, and having two guys get first team honors, I think, is very respectable and moving in the right direction. DJ McKinney for Colorado, he's going to be great as a corner. Pretty unanimous selection there. Jeremiah Cooper from Iowa State. They've just been pumping out defensive backs left and right into the NFL, and looks like he's next up. Two guys from Arizona State from what is a loaded secondary for the Sun Devils. Alford at safety is going to be tremendous, and then Miles Ghost Rouser at nickelback. He's a versatile safety. He could have got any nod from any of these positions, really. And then Bud Clark from TCU remains one of the most elite safeties in college football. I love this group here, Nick. I love this secondary specifically. These are all really impressive players. I think can all compete for some hardware nationally.
It's a really strong defensive team that we put together here, highlighted by a lot of really talented players on the front end and the back end as well. I'll start with the back end. Miles Rouser is a phenomenal player at Kansas State, expecting him to be really solid. Same thing with Xavier Alford, who was really good last year for Arizona State. He's hoping to continue to take that big step forward. DJ McKinney has a lot of holes to fill at Colorado, but I think he can certainly step up and be a really big asset for that team. Jacob Rodriguez nearly got my odd nod as the Defensive Player of the Year for this conference, but I ended up just overlooking him, although he was certainly in contention late for me. From Texas Tech, he's a phenomenal player. Isaiah Glasser got the nod for you for a very good reason here. The defensive line is very intriguing as well. I love Corleone. I highlighted him for a reason. Dom Orange is a very strong player. And David Bailey should seamlessly fit in on this Texas Tech defense that has to improve. Texas Tech's a team that's getting a lot of love, nationally in terms of potential contenders in this conference. So I certainly want to highlight them because their defense was abysmal last year. Their defense was brutal. It certainly held that team back. And if they're going to have dreams of competing in this conference, that defense has to be better. They were 120th or worse in a lot of categories. They were 73rd against the run, which was their best category. So when you look at our picks here, this defense has to be better with Rodriguez there. David Bailey has to improve if this defense wants to turn around, and the Texas Tech Red Raiders want to be a contender in this conference. I like the picks we have here. A lot of variety of names here, a bunch of different schools, and a lot of guys will be really strong and productive.
Now I go ahead and move to our 2025 Big 12 standing projections. Of course, we have the top teams on this first slide. The next slide is going to have the rest of the conference. A lot of teams, of course, in this conference to dissect. And once again, full breakdowns have been put elsewhere. So we're just going to highlight a couple of key categories when it comes to these top teams that we want to discuss here today. Starting with Arizona State. I love this team. Last year we weren't very high on them. Yeah, we were wrong. We get it. This year we're looking to be right, though. I think this team's going to win the conference and go back to the playoff. They get a lot of guys back. I mean, when you look at the offense, they get 7 starters back, and on the defense, they're getting 8. Both sides of the ball were tremendous. Sam Levitt, of course, a great quarterback. Jordan Tyson's going to be a phenomenal player. We're raving about how good the secondary is, and they have numerous guys who are going to compete for all conference honors. Everything with this team is great. They looked good against Texas against the run. They didn't allow a single run of 10-plus yards. So this is a team that seems to be levels above everybody in this conference. Now, the concern I have, and the question I have, Nick, is how nervous are you that they have a letdown? Because it seems like this happens all the time, especially in conferences like the Big 12, the old Pac 12 and whatnot, where teams cannot live up to expectations like they can in the bigger conferences. And of course, they have teams that struggle as well. It just seems to be a common theme in college football, right? And I think that's where I'm kind of having issues because week 2 we play at Mississippi State. That's a losable game. That's a significant SEC trap game. That's going to be a very tough one for them to win. And then they go right into conference play a couple weeks later of a 4-game start. Baylor, TCU, Utah, Texas Tech. You play at Iowa State in November. This is a team, Nick, where I think they're going to be great. On paper, they're phenomenal, but things can get off the rails quickly. You lose at Mississippi State potentially. You lose a couple of close conference games, and you're looking at, staring down the barrel of a 7-8 win season. And that really scares me of Arizona State. I hope it doesn't happen. I don't think it will, but it is a legitimate possibility. How nervous are you?
Yeah, there certainly could be some serious highs with this team, but there could be some serious lows. This schedule is no joke. Arizona State were the darlings last year. We did not give them any love. No one gave them any love. They were picked last in the preseason media poll at the Big 12, and they went out and won the damn thing. We saw them play in the Big 12 title game in person, and we were very impressed with that. They gave Texas a hell of a game in the college football playoff as well. So certainly a team that you want to keep an eye on, and they're getting a lot of love again this year. They're one of the certain favorites to win the conference this year, which makes a ton of sense given the type of returning production they have. I know they lose Scadaboo, but overall this team still returns incredible assets on offense and defense. They get back their quarterback in Sam Levitt, who was absolutely phenomenal last year. They bring back Jordan Tyson, who is a really incredible wide receiver as well. That should be a very big key asset for that offense. The defense has a bunch of guys that are just going to put a job in, week out. They return so many talented pieces in that regard. But if you want a potential scare, yeah, the schedule is kind of scary. At Mississippi State is not a joke. Going into SEC country is never easy, even if it is the worst team in the conference. Those cowbells can get to you, and they can really screw your head up there. You got to play Texas State as well, a very intriguing non-conference matchup. Shouldn't be too difficult, but keep an eye on that. Back-to-back at Baylor, then TCU. Those are two of the teams we're higher on in the conferences. That could be a really big slip-up opportunity. That TCU game is on a Friday night. Certainly keep an eye on that one. They got to play Texas Tech. They got to play at Iowa State, Jack Trice Stadium in Ames. Dreams go to die there. Some tough teams have fallen in that stadium. At Colorado late in the year, maybe there's a scare there. Arizona in a rivalry game late in the year. So certainly a lot of potential hiccups for this team, but I like the coaching. I like what this team can do. I'm confident they're going to win this conference for the second year running. They have so much production to do so, but this seems like a prime letdown opportunity. I'm going to be cautiously optimistic. I'm going to say that this team can do it. They go out there and win the conference. I picked them to win the conference, as did you, but man, a lot of things could go wrong. I'm nervous. I put my nervous scale at probably around about maybe a 6 out of 10. Maybe a 5 out of 10. I still feel like this team can get the job done because I really love the assets they have on offense. I think the coaching is phenomenal, and that defense is really strong and underrated nationally. Keeping an eye on this Arizona State team because if it's going to go wrong, it's going to go wrong early. We'll get a great read on them September 6th at Mississippi State.
I have the Baylor Bears meeting them in Arlington, even though they have one last loss out of conference where I think they lose to Auburn in the season opener. It's a winnable game, of course, but I have them beating Arizona State in the Big 12 opener. And the resume is that's just how the tiebreaker worked out, where Baylor ends up in the conference title game. Their offense is great. They get 8 starters back on a group to put up 34 points per game. We don't need to talk about that here today. The defense, though, I think it's the biggest question mark. Do they have enough on defense to contend? I know Dave Aranda's always been known as like a defensive ace of a coach, but at Baylor, the defense is outside of like 1 year have just not been very good. And last year they weren't very good either. They were outside the top 70 in every single category. 94th in passing yards per game allowed, 81st in scoring, and they only get about 5 starters back. I think they did a great job in the portal of picking up some linebacking help, some edge rushers. They have some good returning starters, guys like Jackie Marshall up front. Keaton Thomas at linebacker is going to be a great player. And then Caden Jenkins at corner. I think Devin Bobby as well at safety is pretty good. I mean, they have a handful of players that are pretty good. They've just not been collectively all that strong. And even though they did do solid work in the portal, it's not really enough to elevate the pass rush, I don't think, to like a very scary level. And I think their run defense has really been struggling in this scheme as well. He had only 23 sacks last year, and their pass defense, despite the young talent, has also been inconsistent. So even though he's been known as an ace of a defensive coach, Nick Aranda, I've not seen that very often, and I'm not really sure if they're going to be great this year either. I think they'll be above average. You give them a B minus, and I think they will improve across the board, but not all that great. I still went with a 9-win prediction though, so I think they'll be good enough. But I mean, this is a big concern for me, and I'm not overblown with this unit.
I think this Baylor team can beat Auburn week 1 at what is a very key matchup on August 29th. Yeah, that's a really big opportunity for them to pick up a key win to kick off the season, but I am equally concerned with the defense. 81st in points per game last year, 26.7 points per game given up, 87th yards per game, 94th against the pass, 72nd against the run, 94th against the pass. That's a very concerning number. The secondary showed some weaknesses last year. 234.2 yards per game is a lot to give up. I like some of the portal work they did. I think Devin Turner was a solid add at strong safety. He's a guy from Northwestern that I think was a really good asset from that program they added up. They bring back Caden Jenkins at corner. I think will be really good. Tevin Williams will probably play that other side at corner, at right corner. He'll be good. Devin Bobby was solid as well. Did they do enough in the portal in the secondary? I don't know if they did. Tyler Turner, Calvin Simpson, Hunt comes in as well. But overall, there's still some lacking depth. The defensive line has some nice pieces, but I do worry about some of the depth there as well. Linebacking core, they added a ton of different guys. Matthew Fobbs White, they're hoping can step up. Travion Barnes, they want to see what they can do. At Marion Winston, another player they added that they hope can get some stuff out of. Keaton Thomas was good for them last year, but he's got to step up and be big. This Baylor offense will put up a ton of points, right? They're going to light you up every single week. They were really good last year. They almost scored 35 points per game last year, but the defense is a bit of a liability. I like Aranda as a coach, and I think he has coached some good defenses, but it hasn't been good enough at this program. If this team wants to compete for a conference title, the defense has to be better. I'm not sure I'm buying in fully yet. I just don't know if they have the pieces on defense to contend. I like the portal work, and I certainly think I could be wrong. But right now, I'm taking a more cautious approach, which is why I went with 8-4 for this team compared to them getting to those higher win totals that you did. A very talented team, but this defense could be a liability. Curious to see how that secondary looks week one against Auburn, who's going to look to try and air it out with their new quarterback. If they can win that battle and play really strong football here, I feel like I'll start to be a little bit wrong and start to get proven wrong that this Baylor defense keep up to this pace there. A very intriguing unit, but I'm certainly keeping my eye on whether they can contend, especially in the secondary.
Now we stick with defense as we shift to the Red Raiders, a team with the top-ranked portal class. Obviously, they're doing a lot of work when it comes to spending money, and they're able to lure some highly attractive players to this team. That completes a complete revampment of their defensive line, led by David Bailey, Romello Height. Of course, they got Skylar Gill Hunter, or Howard, that is, and then Lee Hunter on the interior. And of course, they've recruited that position very well. When we did our breakdown, they're incredibly deep in terms of guys they brought from the high school ranks as well. So they have an elite defensive line, two great linebackers, including Jacob Rodriguez, of course. Thing is, this team last year on defense, they ranked outside the top 120 in three different categories. They were no good, 35 points per game allowed, second to worst pass defense in the country. They did some solid additions in the secondary. I think the pass rush, though, if they can really live up to the expectations, which is 40 sacks for me, which would put them around top three nationally, then I think the secondary will be all right. And the question here is, how strong can they truly be? What is the ceiling? Because this team has just always been abysmal on defense, and they just had this monstrous free agency class, Nick, that's going to come in, and they're going to hope can revive them. And I think it will, but I'm really not sure what the ceiling will be. I still gave them a B minus collectively. I think maybe that's a bit harsh, but at the same time, they were an F last year. You don't just go from an F to an A, in one season. It typically doesn't work like that, so that's why I went for a more modest approach of a B minus for as much as they have, as much as I love. We still got to be realistic here at the end of the day, and so that's why I think this defense will be good enough to put them at 10 wins and compete for the conference. They're a top 10 offense nationally. That's no secret one bit. But if this defense can really elevate to a B or a B plus, they can be nasty on a national level, Nick, when it comes to competing for a title. The ceiling we're really just not sure about, so I went with a B minus. How are you seeing it?
If I had concerns with the Baylor defense, I'm sure some Baylor fans are already yelling in the comments saying, "What are your concerns with Texas Tech? That defense was way worse." You're right, that defense was way worse. That was a brutal Texas Tech defense last year. 122nd in points per game, 127th in yards per game, 133rd in pass yards per game, 73rd overall in rush yards per game. This was a downright abysmal defense. They were brutal last year. They just could not stop the run at times. They could not stop the pass. They were one of the worst secondaries in college football. They have to find a way to improve. They went out and did a lot of work on the portal. I don't know if they addressed the needs in the secondary as much as they probably should have. Bryce Pollock was a good add at cornerback. I think he's a really good asset they bring in from Mississippi State. They want to see what he can do. He had 9 pass breakups last year. Cole Wisnowski is an intriguing add from the SCS level. But outside of that, they didn't really bring in enough pieces. Dante Balfour was not a bad add either, but I'm curious to see what he looks like. They're relying on some guys from last year that just did not play great football. They revamped the defensive line, which I think is interesting. David Bailey is a great add. Lee Hunter, phenomenal add. Skylar Gill Howard and Romeo Height are really good adds as well. But I'm curious why they didn't address the secondary issues as well. They didn't bring in enough pieces. They didn't really balance that, in my opinion, here. I like the coaching. I like the system they run, but the defense was just abysmal last year. If this team wants to compete for a conference title, they got to be a lot better on the defensive side of the ball. A B minus, I think, is a fair grade. I would probably similarly grade them at that level right now. Can they get better? Certainly possible. But can they be closer to what they were last year? That's also possible. a whole new unit on the defensive line. I don't love out of the portal. I like what they have at linebacker. Ben Roberts and Jacob Rodriguez are two phenomenal leaders who I think will step up and be really big for this team. But that secondary still concerns me. I don't think they made enough work in the portal. I don't think they have enough returning production to really get anything impressive in the secondary for me. I think the secondary could certainly hold this team back and be a reason why they're not playing in a conference title game, as neither of us picked them to go play in a conference title game. Despite the strong record, I think some disappointing losses will hold this team back. I'm very high on this Texas Tech team, but that secondary does concern me a little bit. It also concerns me on the defensive line with a whole new look there as well. Curious to see how this Tech team moves forward here. They're spending a lot of NIL money. They're bringing a lot of different talents in. Joe McGuire is a great coach, but this defense still could hold this team back.
Let's go ahead and move to Kansas State, who is actually the odds-on favorite to win this conference, which I don't really understand. But Chris Klieman's a heck of a coach, and this team is always very sound on both sides of the ball. And so the question for us is, pretty simple. How confident are we that Avery Johnson can lead them to that next level, and that's winning the conference and potentially making a run in the CFP? And the reason we say that is because they're going to be sound on this side of the ball with the scheme they run, the run game. It's going to be good. The defense is going to be very good as well, even though they don't hit the portal very hard and not going to blow you away with talent. They're very good at coaching here. This is a good football team year to year. So for them to reach that, next level, it's going to be up to Avery Johnson, who enters his second year or his third year now in the program, second year as a full-time starter. This is a guy who showcases nice pocket awareness. I think he's a nice, calm player, nimble with his feet, really impressive with his release. I think, he can really shine when it comes to throwing the ball in the intermediate range. Of course, he's a good balanced player. He's a phenomenal runner with good reads, good speed. The thing is when it comes to consistency and taking the next step as a passer, he still is a young guy. But now that he's a junior, Nick, it's ready. It's got to be ready now, to take that next step and to be a guy who can be a field general. Last year in the losses, he struggled. They had 4 of them. He completed 55% on average in those games, 6 picks, 4 touchdowns. Wasn't as effective as a runner as well. So this is a good quarterback. Only 177 yards in those losses as well. So this is a phenomenal player, Nick. Upside for him is tremendous, but that's kind of simple when it comes to Kansas State. Are we going to take that next step ever as a program? It's really just going to come down to your quarterback playing like one that can compete, for a Heisman, be a top 10 guy at his position. That's all it is. And I think for Avery Johnson, I'm confident he can take those next steps, but I guess we'll find out how consistent he can be, which I'm still on the fence about.
A lot of hopes and confidence in the Kansas State team relies on Avery Johnson under center in Manhattan. This team has a lot of hopes coming out of that area of Kansas. They think they can go out and win this conference, and they're the favorites to do so, which I can understand to a degree. Avery Johnson is a phenomenal quarterback, 6'3", 200 pounds. He is a phenomenal runner. I want to start with that. 605 yards on the ground, 5.4 yards per carry, and 7 scores last year at 113 attempts. He needs to certainly polish his passing attack, but I don't think it's super concerning. 58% comp rate was, solid last year. 2,700 yards is certainly a little bit lower than you were probably hoping for. 25 touchdowns, not bad, but the 10 picks is certainly concerning. I don't love the 10 picks. I think it's a very big potential red flag for Avery Johnson. It seemed like he made some curious mistakes there, threw the ball into harm's way on some occasions there. That percentage, 2.7 interception percent ratio is not great. A 6.7 TD percent ratio is not terrible, but you would like to see that number be a little bit higher here. I think Johnson's a phenomenal runner. I like the O-line they have built in front of him. I like what this team has built around him. The weapons are solid. They went to the portal and added some interesting pieces. The rushing attack with Dylan Edwards should be still solid. He's a really good back that they plug in there. But Avery Johnson has to be confident in the pocket. He has to be accurate. I think Chris Klieman's a hell of a coach, and I really do like the team that he's built around his young quarterback who got some good experience last year. But making them the favorites in this conference, I can't quite agree with that. I think there's teams that are better than them, like Arizona State, like Texas Tech, like Baylor. There's just a question mark with the quarterback here. I think when you look at the teams like Arizona State and Texas Tech, you feel better about what they have at quarterback right now. I think Avery Johnson's a great player, can certainly continue to develop here, but I'm not fully buying in on him. I'm quietly confident, curious to see what he can do. Again, I put my confidence around a 6 with Avery Johnson right now. I think he can really be good for this team, but I'm not super confident he can lead him to the postseason. We'll see him early, week 0, right? This is a team that's going to play in week 0 over there in Dublin, Ireland against Iowa State. So we'll get a big read on Johnson early on if he can handle that pressure and handle that moment as a second-year starter. We'll keep an eye on that game. A very intriguing team across the board here. I like what they return on defense. I like what they return on offense as well. 5 starters on defense, 4 starters on offense, but a lot of it relies on Avery Johnson. Can he get this team back to glory in the Big 12?
Yeah, and again, this is an offense that's tough to defend. They run it very well. They're coached at a pretty adequate rate. The run game showcases very good explosiveness and production, but at times they just run into a wall where they play tougher defenses, and the offenses cannot rise above what they're playing because the quarterback limitations are there. Even when Will Howard was there, was a great quarterback. They still kind of ran into a wall sometimes. And of course, as a lot to do with your supporting cast as well. Avery Johnson, though, I think can certainly play better this year, and he definitely will. But against the tougher defenses, it remains to be seen. Looking at TCU to cap off this first slide, question I have here is: do the strengths significantly outweigh the weaknesses for this team? And I think that's what they need to do for them to make another run like they had a couple of seasons ago. Because as much as I love them, I love Sonny Dykes and Josh Hoover and an offense that's going to score 40 a game this year. There's some things you have to discuss with this team because when you're as weak as they are in certain areas, like last year, their run game efficiency wasn't very good, 113th nationally. We don't typically see that from a Dykes offense. The pass rush, they were respectable at times, but that mixed with the poor run defense certainly is going to lead to some weaknesses on the defensive side of the ball, and they just were not good at defending the run for the most part of the year. They gave up 200 plus yards on like 5 or 6 different occasions. And again, Nick, for this team to reach those lofty goals, your offense has to put up those type of numbers, 40, 45 points a game to outweigh the weaknesses you have. If they can have more balance and kind of shore those things up, and they can jump up to about 35 sacks this year, led by the Deal brothers. The secondary, I think, is really good, but they can certainly continue to be better, led by All-American and Bud Clark. And if that run game can, showcase that balance they had a couple years ago with Kendre Miller, then this team can go 12-0 realistically. I don't think that's too hard to assume. But again, Nick, that's hard to do on the field for them, is to be great in all areas, especially with this highly explosive offense. It's kind of an interesting question I have here posed for you, but I'm looking forward to your answer.
Yeah, it's a very intriguing team. Can they find a way to put that balance between the offense and defense? And then also zooming in, can they find a way to balance the rushing attack and the passing game? It's no joke that Josh Hoover, and no hiding it, that Josh Hoover is a phenomenal player and he'll be able to air out the ball a ton. But eighth in and pass yards per game at 312, 113th and 113 yards per game at running the ball. It's just not good enough, right? You need to have more ideal balance here. You got to find a way to raise that rushing attack and get it better here. They bring Trent Battle back. They bring back Jeremy Payne as well, a younger player. Kevayon Barnes was an interesting add out of the portal. They're hoping he could be a guy that could step up and be a key asset rushing the ball. He was decent at UTSA at times, but overall, this is still a weak rushing attack. The offensive line's got to be better in run protection. They were solid in pass block, but they weren't great in run block. They have some interesting assets at wide receiver that are just fine for Josh Hoover, and I think he's the best quarterback in this conference, so I'm not concerned about there. When you flip the script to the defense, right, this defense had some successful moments last year, and it wasn't the worst unit in the world, but 62nd in terms of points per game, 24.6, probably a little too high if you're going to be competing for the conference. Got to find a way to be better against the run as well. 160 yards per game and 83rd in the nation just isn't good enough for your defense here. I like the pieces they have. I think Zach Chapman's a player that will step up, a younger guy. Marcus Deal as well. Those are two younger sophomores, though, redshirt sophomores. Devon Deal's a veteran player. His brother, Travis Jackson, another sophomore. So they're a very young defensive line and a really young pass rush / run defense. So that's certainly concerning. I think Bud Clark's a great leader, and the secondary, Channing Canada, will certainly find a way to be strong for this unit. Elijah Jackson was a decent add out of the portal who they hope could step up and be a big difference maker from Washington. This defense has to be better against the run, and this offense is better at running the ball. Those are the two big key things. Can they run the ball? Can they stop the run? If they can find a way to improve in both of those categories, which could be a very lofty goal, but if they can find a way to improve in both those categories, they will find themselves competing for this conference title. I think they will improve in both those categories, and that's why I have them in the conference title game, falling just short to Arizona State. I think the rushing attack will be a lot better on offense. I think the run defense will be a lot better than last year, leaps and bounds better, potentially pushing them in a better category there. If they can find a way to balance those two things out, improve at running the ball and improve at run defense, this team can certainly win this title. And Sonny Dykes has done it before. He's a phenomenal coach. He's got a great quarterback here. Andy Alavos is a great defensive coordinator as well. So I trust him to build this defense. Last year was a building block year. This year they got to improve and commit on defense to being strong if they want to win this conference.
Now I move to the second slide here, which has the rest of the teams with their conference records here. And of course, we've already broke these teams down in full once again, so we're not going to sit here and highlight every single one of them once again. I think the main ones I want to look at are going to be the two teams in Utah, the Utes and then the Cougars. BYU originally would have made that first slide at 9-3, and then Jake Retzloff was axed from the program. That forced me to drop him down to 8-4. As despite having guys like L.J. Martin, Chase Roberts, physical offensive line, I think quarterback's going to be a big liability for him now. And that's going to lead to regression on the offense. I definitely think the defense will continue to be great, led by the aforementioned Isaiah Glasker, Jake Kelly, great linebacking group, playmakers in the secondary. The thing about their defense, though, is they only had 20 sacks last year. They were dead last in FBS the year before that, so that just doesn't seem to be a strong suit. And then their secondary had an interception in every single game last year, and you're just not going to snag picks at that same rate. If they do, I mean, that would be incredible, right? But that's just not something you can count on a year-to-year basis to be that great at forcing turnovers. And every single turnover they force set them up with great field position, so that's significantly boosted those offensive numbers, Nick. So as much as I love Kalani Sitake and BYU, I think the loss of Jake Retzloff now, and knowing what I know about the defense when it comes to regression, when it comes to turnovers, and the pass rush likely not going to perform, they could have a big step back, and I wouldn't be shocked. They could also win the conference, and I probably wouldn't be as shocked. But I think now they're in a big predicament as their quarterback is gone.
It's never positive when your quarterback, has to leave your program late into July. That's really never what you want to see. I understand the circumstances around Retzlaff were certainly iffy, and we've already talked about the murky situation there. He ends up at Tulane, where he's probably going to be the starter for that program, but it's tough. You lose your quarterback here, and they don't really have a whole lot at BYU right now. Makara Hillstead will probably start. Baron Bachmeyer might get a run out as true freshman. Tyson Borgett maybe find a way to get on the field here. But I think the defense is also a concerning position. Linebacker, I worry about some of the pieces outside of Glasgow, who's really a phenomenal asset. He'll be really good. But outside of him, I worry about some of those guys around him. The secondary, they were really good last year. They were able to get a ton of picks. They were able to be really aggressive last year. But can you kind of keep up that same level of aggression? I don't know if that's sustainable for a defense, which is really something you want to keep a look at here. They're 20th in the nation against the pass last year. I don't know if they can sustain that right now. The pass rush is certainly a concern as well. They're very weak in that regard. They didn't really do enough, in my opinion, with the guys they added at tackle. Justin Kirkland they added there. Asani Purcell as well they added. I think Kirkland's a good player, but can you rely on him? He only had 1 sack last year at Oklahoma State. I don't know if you can rely on him to be a sack getter for a team that desperately needs sacks. Brody Schoonover was not great last year. Logan Latayi was not great either at times. So you got to find a way to get after the quarterback here. I don't know if they'll be able to do so. That combined with the uncertainty at quarterback and a major liability in the making at quarterback as well puts me a little bit colder on BYU. I think they will struggle at times this year. They won't be able to get to the heights that we expected just a couple months ago. Definitely a tough spot to be in if I'm a BYU fan. I'm certainly bitterly disappointed. Hopefully this team plays with some serious heart, finds a way to rally around the offense, and put some strong defense together to get some results on the field still, despite the adversity they're facing all off season.
Now we look at Utah, a team that's very intriguing to me, and I'm dreading the possibility of being significantly wrong on them. 8-4, still a respectable year, but they can win this conference and do it with absolute ease. And we did this episode on Utah just yesterday, so I might sound like a bit of a broken record to Nick, but I'm really excited about what they can bring to the table. Devon Dampier comes over from New Mexico. I loved watching him last year. I gave him a bit of a Marcel Reed from Texas A&M comp with a little bit more spice, though. Phenomenal playmaker. He's a great runner. Wayshawn Parker, of course, comes over from Wazoo as well. And, of course, they're going to be behind a phenomenal offensive line that gets all 5 starters back. Elite unit, Spencer Fano, first-team all-conference. I think they're one of the top units in the country. So I think it's possible this run game is just going to completely decimate this entire conference. You know what they're going to have on defense. It's going to be a top 25 unit. At full health or not, the defense is going to be top 25 regardless. I think there's some concerns potentially with the secondaries. They kind of went to the FCS level to pick up a lot of transfers. But again, they're coached very well by Morgan Scalley on that side of the ball. And the biggest thing for me, Nick, is this schedule is primed and ready for them. I have picked them to lose the Tech and Arizona State. Both those games come at home. Late in the year, they host Kansas State as well. And I picked them to lose 2 road games at BYU and at UCLA. This team could absolutely go undefeated because the schedule really is primed for them. Because when you pick a team like Utah to lose at home, that really is just a coin flip, quite frankly, even if the other team is very impressive that's visiting. I think this run game can be absolutely deadly. I think they could at most put up 250 yards per game. I think the creativity they're going to have is impressive, and they're always going to be physical in the trenches. So why are we so low on this team?
This is a team that has injury concerns. That's why I'm low on this team again. It has inexperience concerns. They were injured and banged up last year. It was a big problem, which is why I was so low on them compared to a lot of the nation. But I'm also concerned about the ability to pass. Devon Dampier is a phenomenal runner. There's no hiding that. He was really good as a running quarterback for New Mexico last year. I mean, over 1,000 yards, 19 touchdowns, really impressive. But if he gets hurt, what's the backup plan? Isaac Wilson, who was horrible last year. Braden Zerberger, who didn't do anything at Oklahoma. Zerberg, that is, I beg your pardon, at Oklahoma, who transfers in. That's concerning. He's potentially a fragile quarterback here. You obviously don't want to, put out that idea, but this is something you have to think about when you're looking at long-term stability for a program. I think Dampier is a good player running the ball again, but I just question what he can do as a passer. He's a bit of a liability as a passer. Had 12 interceptions last year, 57% comp rate, 2,700 yards passing. Can he develop better as a passer? I look at the weapons he has, a completely new looked room with wide receivers from different programs, Tobias Merriweather, Larry Simmons, Ryan Davis. They're hoping they can get something out of those guys. Creed Whitmore from Mississippi State. They're hoping he can be a productive asset as well. Don't know if I'm fully confident in any of those guys. Wayshawn Parker at running back from Wazoo. They're hoping he can be a big guy that can be solid. I like the O-line a lot for this Utah team. This O-line is strong, but again, if they have some health concerns, the depth is a little bit shaky at times. You look at the defense, they didn't do a whole lot of portal work on the defense. Blake Cotton comes in. Don Saunders comes in, Jalen Moonson come in. These are all guys from JUCO Community College ranks, lower level football players that are hoping to take a big step forward. I like what they have at linebacker. I think Lander Barton's a phenomenal player, as is Dumani, who comes back from his injury last year. Jonathan Hall is a good leader for this team. Logan Fano will be really good, as will John Henry Daly. But I just get a little bit concerned, a little bit soft on this team at times. They have a tough opening week game against UCLA on the road. That's not an easy game out of conference. The conference schedule features some tough matchups as well that could certainly go sour very quickly. They got to play that Arizona State team that we aforementioned. They got to travel to BYU, even with their uncertainty. That's tough. Got to travel to Baylor, have to play Kansas State late in the season, Texas Tech early on as well, with that Arizona State matchup sandwiched in there. So it's a tough schedule for this team. I like the coaching. I trust the coaching historically, but I'm just a little cautiously optimistic on this team. They burned a lot of people last year, and they fell short of expectations. I could kind of see it coming, but they fell even farther than I thought they would. A team that, a boom or bust team. They could certainly boom and find themselves in the conference title game, or they could bust again and find themselves missing a bowl game. A very hot and cold potential with the Utah Utes this year.
Now we'll cap things off with the Colorado. This is an interesting team because now they go from the glitz and glamour, Travis Hunter, Shedeur Sanders are gone, to being a team that just no one seems to be talking about this offseason. Portal class was good, but it certainly wasn't anything to blow you away other than what they did at the quarterback position, bringing in Caden Salter and Julian Lewis. The thing is this team now is elite playmaking, and they have to be great in all facets of their offense, and the run game's been non-existent. I think the addition of Salter, though, certainly gives them that missing element that they would have loved to have with Shedeur, and that's the QB run. I think that can certainly lead to some improved production on the ground. I think Draylon and Omari and Miller are going to be really good wide receivers, and then Jordan Seaton, of course, is an elite left tackle. Other than that, though, the offensive line, the run game, they've been awful so far, and now they have significantly larger responsibilities on their shoulders, Nick. The defense last year, I thought, played very admirably. Certainly wasn't perfect, but I think for a year or two, it's exactly what you were looking for, and they're incredibly deep up front. I think the linebacking group had some nice additions in the portal as well. The secondary has a couple of good players. I think, of course, DJ McKinney's going to be a first-teamer. There's a lot to like about this team. They had a solid pass rush last year. But I just don't feel like they're going to be all that good collectively this year is the issue, Nick. We could be totally wrong. But again, the momentum has just kind of died out on this program, and it's certainly leaving a bit of a sour taste in my mouth. And I definitely think this offense could be absolutely horrendous this year. They could also be really good, as they do have upside. I just don't know. So I went with 6-7 wins this year. I think they'll be a respectable football team. I just don't think they're going to scare anybody like last year. I just don't know if they're going to be must-see TV either. When that momentum starts to die out within this program, I certainly wonder how they'll perform on the field.
The last couple of years, it felt like Hollywood was camped out in Boulder, Colorado. Boulder had become the new Hollywood. Well, the cameras and lights have all gone home, and they've migrated back to Southern California. And what's left is a team that's got a bunch of transfers still and a mix of returning production while losing their top players to the NFL draft. Deion Sanders is back. He's going to try and see what he can do here, and I do like some of the pieces he returns. I think Amarion Miller and Dayron Miller are two really strong players at wide receiver. Jordan Seaton is a phenomenal must-watch guy at offensive tackle. Dallas Hayden is not a bad back, but he's got a lot of work to do on the defensive side of the ball. They return Amari McNeil, who was solid for this team, Arden Walker, who I liked what he can do, R.J. Johnson, DJ McKinney, and Preston Hodge are all solid players. They bring in some solid players as well. Keaton Salter, he was really good in 2023. He had phenomenal numbers then. 2024, he was brutal, an absolute shell of himself, and really struggled on all facets of the game. They bring in Julian Lewis as a five-star, who people are clamoring already for him to get on the field. I think Salter will have to get some reps early on and kind of guide this thing in. Jaheim Otis comes over from Alabama with high-end pedigree. Reginald Hughes comes over. He's an interesting player as well. But I feel like this team's kind of losing some of that vibe. A lot of that is because of the high name players like Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter that they lose to the NFL draft. But they also lose B.J. Green, who was a phenomenal player. Hill Green as well, who's a phenomenal player. Will Shepard, LeJounte Wester. These are all players they lose that were really key assets to this team that ended up winning 9 games last year. They lose the Heisman Trophy winner. That's never easy to overcome. The schedule has some tough teams on it. Georgia Tech, that's no joke. Out of the ACC week 1, they're a very strong team. At Utah, at Kansas State, at West Virginia could certainly be tough as well. Same deal with Houston. I like the coaching. I think Shermer's proven to be a solid offensive coordinator. He's going to have to do a lot of work with Keaton Salter to get him up to speed and get him confident in this offense. I like some of the pieces here, but I also think they've gambled on the portal again too much with the rest of the offensive line. You have Seton, but then who the hell knows they're going to plug in on the rest of the offensive line. They have so many different guys from various programs they're going to try and trot out and see what they can do. I worry about the pass catcher group a little bit outside the top 2 guys. Sincere Brown was a good add, but the 2 deep is all transfers who have limited experience at other programs. The linebacking core, same deal, completely revamped there and not really returning any production in that position of the field as well. Concerned about the outlook of Colorado here. I think this is still a good team with some good players, but I think this team can get back to 9 wins is kind of ludicrous to me. I think they're going to be closer to that 6 to 7 range, 5 maybe even. It's going to be tough to find a way for them to get into a bowl game, in my opinion. I think best case is 7 wins right now, but 5 feels more likely here. Could be a tough season in Boulder, Colorado.
And through the first 2 years, they only have 1 game of 150-plus rushing yards. They do absolutely nothing on the ground. Not a thing. Literally don't even sniff doing anything, Nick. So they need to do something to add more balance because you no longer have those playmakers. Your top 4 receivers are gone. A great elite quarterback in Shedeur is not going to be out there standing behind this offensive line that's letting them get hit play over play. And, the toughness he had was tremendous, and the playmaking was just phenomenal. They got to do something because, again, they don't even sniff picking up yards on the ground.
65 yards per game on the ground is not good enough, right? That's just never going to be good enough. It's not even close to average enough. 134th in the nation is abysmal. You have to find more balance. A lot of that's on the offensive line, but a lot of that's on the running back room. Is Dallas Hayden a guy you think you can rely on? Micah Welch, Charlie Offenderall, are these guys you can certainly rely on? I don't think so. They're taking a gamble here again. They didn't really go to the portal a whole lot. DeCarolion Taylor was their only add from Incarnate Ward. Again, another feels like a risky move there. Would have liked to see them trying to address that position more. If they can't get closer to 80, 90 yards per game on the ground, it could be a long season for Colorado.
In the 4 losses last year, it averaged 0.4 yards per carry. So that's pretty interesting. It's me for today's episode. Big 12 is as deep as always. It's a very interesting conference. A lot of wild cards as always. So this was a big fun blast doing this as always, Nick. We can be completely wrong like we were last year, or we could be right. I think we're in for a phenomenal season, though, in the Midwest this year. This conference is going to be what I call it, the new Pac-12. With Pac-12 after dark, there's always so many exciting moments, so many wild card teams, so many random players that would emerge. The Big 12 is now the new Pac-12, now that conference is done with, and I think that leads to a lot of excitement.
Extremely exciting conference. West Virginia, UCF, they bring back former coaches, hoping to reignite that spark. Houston should potentially take a step forward. Cincinnati could be a strong team. Kansas, Iowa State, hoping to have good seasons under longtime head coaches. Oklahoma State and Gundy, they had a bad year last year. They're hoping to find a way to bounce back. And then Arizona, same deal, hoping to bounce back after what was a letdown season. They have a good quarterback under center as well. A lot of talented rosters, a lot of talented players. Anyone could really win this conference given the type of talent that they have. Is a very wide open conference. You could certainly pick a bunch of different teams here to get the job done. A very intriguing, exciting conference. It's got a lot of wild cards. Got to watch this conference week in, week out. A very exciting team, and I'm curious to see who's going to be playing in Arlington in December for this conference title. Who knows at this moment in time? It could be any combination of these teams. A lot of exciting teams all fighting for that conference title and a spot in the college football playoff.
That's going to be it for today's episode. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.